What can Gazans do who have not been able to leave Gaza City and now find themselves encircled by IDF?
Israel has been continuing to operate humanitarian corridors over the last few days. And by the way, most residents of northern Gaza have heeded Israel's warning. Of the 1.1 million residents of northern Gaza, latest figures I've seen are that only 100,000 remain in the north, and that is before the humanitarian corridors of recent days. The fighting in northern Gaza is going to get dangerous. It's going to get dangerous because Hamas has literally embedded itself under people's homes, under schools, underneath hospitals, and those are all legitimate targets under international law. When Prime Minister Rishi Sunak says the UK wants Israel to win, it wants us to go after these terror targets so they can never perpetrate the massacre again. And we hope that civilians will continue heeding our warning.
My understanding of international law is that they are only targets that you can aim at as long as civilians are not in the path of those missiles and rockets.
No, that is, so it's important that we're on the same page about international law, and I know that's very important for British, very important for British audiences especially. International law says that medical units may not be used under any circumstances to shield military targets. The fact that Hamas has its military headquarters in the basement of the Shifa hospital is a war crime, period. The next article of international law, I'm quoting Additional Protocol 1 of the Geneva Conventions, generally taken as a faithful reflection of customary international law, says that those medical units may lose their protected status when they are used to shield military targets, as long as sufficient warning has been given and every possible precaution taken to get civilians out of harm's way. It does not say that the targets underneath hospitals may only be targeted once there are no civilians in the vicinity. It says they become legitimate targets when our army has made every possible precaution to get civilians out of harm's way. And I'll remind you, it's been 3 weeks now that Israeli soldiers have been placing 20,000 phone calls to residents of Gaza, urging them to leave, dropping 1.5 million leaflets, sending 10 million SMS.
Well, what about those that can't move from the hospitals?
We understand that it is very difficult. Israel also has its own internally displaced person problem. We have 250,000 evacuees, including elderly people, including sick people who've been forced to leave Sderot, who've been forced to leave Kiryat Shmona up in the north because we want to get them out of harm's way. And we want Palestinians to get out of harm's way as well. And we think that anyone in the international community genuinely concerned for civilians should be helping and encouraging that evacuation of civilians to get them out of harm's way. That is their responsibility under international law, instead of criticizing Israel for doing everything it can, more than any army in the history of warfare, by the way, to keep the other side's civilians safe from the consequences of their own leaders' reckless endangerment of them.